Right then, so welcome everybody to the Building Blocks podcast by Pagabo. This is number 2 in our series, and today we are going to be discussing carbon zero, in fact, in construction and the whole process. I'm Gerard Topless. I'm the Executive Chairman here at Pagabo, and today we have the following guests. We have Jose Hernandez from Piqueverard, we have Paul Chatwin from Cundalls, and we have Jane King from Morgan Sindall. I'm going to start by asking our guests just to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what they do. So I'll start with you, Jose.
Thank you, Gerard. My name is Jose Hernandez. As you said, I work for Piqueverard. I'm the Director for Sustainability and Energy. And as the title says, basically driving the work that we do across many different sectors and projects and so on in relation to sustainability, thermal modeling, sustainability assessments, and nowadays very much so zero carbon.
Okay, that's great, Jose. So our next guest is Paul. So Paul, just tell us a little bit about who you are.
Hi, Gerard. My name is Paul Chatwin from Cundall, and I lead a sustainability and building physics team in the Birmingham office for Cundall. And similar to Jose, for the past probably 10, 15 years, I've been looking at sustainable and doing environmental sustainable design, amongst many other things. And yes, net zero is definitely the hot topic for the last year.
Great. And finally, Jane, want to tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, thanks, Gerard. Yeah, my name's Jane King and I work for Morgan Sindall Construction Division. I've been with the business about 15 years. My role is UK Environmental Manager, mainly dealing with environmental compliance, but also looking at our sustainability strategy, which is, as you can imagine, heavily focused on reducing carbon and reducing waste, as well as that environmental protection piece. It's quite an exciting time for me. I've got a personal interest in embodied carbon, going back to 10 years when I did a thesis around embodied carbon in buildings. So yeah, and I just think it's a really exciting time right now to be in the carbon field.
So that's great. So yeah, thank you everybody. Thanks for taking the time today. And as Paul said, carbon has certainly become a hot topic. So let's start. Okay, the first question I've got for you all is the UK government is committed to achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2050, which is 30 years away. First question, is this achievable? Jose?
In short, yes. And in a bit longer, it better be. Otherwise, we are all in very serious trouble. It's going to be a difficult journey. It's going to be a transformative journey. But I think that we are actually now at an interesting time also. We're still in the middle of COVID-19. And I think that it's bringing a perspective also, a global perspective and focus on an issue that is global, that it affects everybody. And that affects not just our current society, but generations to come. So it is achievable, lots of work ahead, but I think that we are many people are ready for that. And also it's interesting that there is a confluence of pressure. I think that there is a level of pressure from bottom to top, and young people are especially keen and very, very aware of the issue, but also now from top to bottom. And it's not just the commitment from government, it's also the commitment from many local authorities that, as we will discuss, are going beyond and looking to achieve zero carbon well before 2050. And there is that political commitment and delivery that we need to respond to.
Okay, so that's it. You made a couple of interesting points there. So I like the point about the young people of today. They're going to help drive that. So it's really in the future worker across every sort of sector is certainly driving a different agenda. Paul, 2050, is it too late? We do hear sort of differing arguments about this. Do you think it's too late, or will it be enough time?
I think, and probably my panelists will agree, that it is too late, but it's something that we need to be aspiring for, targeting and trying to achieve. And it's good that the UK government has taken this stance. And I think we all know that the existing building stock is the toughest challenge. And I think the beauty about the 2050 kind of deadline is it does give us this 30-year window to actually say, when is it right for my portfolio of buildings, or the activities that we're taking place, when do I need to focus on doing certain things? When is, you know, you don't go in there now and strip out everything, which may be good. Like Jane's saying, the circular economy principles, you don't want to be throwing things away, but when that facade starts to leak like a sieve and needs a repair it so it's actually, you know, really robust to passive house standards or the like. And that means then you can take a whole holistic view on the kind of the services that you put in there. So from a consultancy background, from a building physics background, 2050 is a bit late. We would like it sooner. We've been talking long enough about this, the whole climate change scenario, but it's great that we have this deadline to try to make sure we can fix things now and do things different.
That's a very good point there, Paul. I mean, the 30-year window, Jane. That's does that I think Paul's point there is it gives us time to actually make sure we're putting the principles in place and the activities in place, because we do have a very old stock across the whole sort of construction or the built environment. So what's your view? Is it achievable, and is the timing just about right?
If I put my environmentalist hat on, then we've absolutely left it too late. You know, we need radical changes now. But I think the interesting thing is that there's the tools and the guidance with things like the LETI guide, providing the sort of system and guidance for how to do that, both from the sort of net zero operational carbon, but also more relevant for me, the embodied carbon. You know, we need to get, I think it's something like 65% of the embodied carbon within all buildings delivered by 2030 to meet those net zero targets or government targets. But yeah, I'm quite excited by the fact we've now got these legally binding targets, and I think there is that will in the industry. You know, we've got a lot of graduates, and we have people interviewing us when they come to work for Morgan Sindall and asking where we're up to with carbon reduction. So I think it is achievable, and the will's there, and the guidance is there. But what perhaps needs to change is the procurement methodology within the industry to enable it to happen, and you know, with clients having that strategic direction and aim, and making it part of the whole construction delivery, then I think it is achievable. It's a radical change from where we are or where we have been.
So big changes, and you know, it's interesting that you mentioned from, say, an environmentalist perspective, because I think it is clear that, you know, when we hear the reports and we see some of the new thought leadership about this, you know, we have left it too late. The ice caps are struggling. There's a whole bunch of sort of changes. This past few weeks, we've seen possibly some of the outputs from the carbon. You know, we've had heat waves. It's been great in one sense, but it does sort of give us that sort of thought, I guess. You mentioned the LETI report there. That's an interesting report. I mean, 49% of nearly half of annual carbon emissions are coming from buildings, the places we live and work. So you know, what are we going to do to try and combat this in our sector? You know, particularly around. We'll talk a little bit later about new buildings, but let's just talk about repurposing buildings, because half of that carbon is coming from those. So, Jose, what's your views of that?
Fully agree in terms of the need to address the existing buildings. There is no way; it's just completely impossible, obviously, to get to zero carbon without addressing that. I think we actually have a unique opportunity. We know there is going to be a significant need for an economic recovery, and we have the opportunity for that to be a green economic recovery. We need that to be. It's an opportunity to break the correlation that there has been between CO2 emissions and growth. We need job growth. We need to disassociate that from carbon emissions, and it's a key element right now. And as much as there is an element that is being put forward on build, we just need to make sure that is build better, build greener, and also no build. And that no build, on many occasions, it's going to be us telling clients, you don't need to build a new building, you just need to refurbish what you have or to make better use of other existing facilities. And that cuts across the private sector and the public sector. Going briefly back in relation to the targets local authorities set in 2030, that is very challenging, but I feel more comfortable talking about 2030 than 2050 to make sure that we don't waste any time in relation to that. We need to bear something in mind. It's not just about the target date. It's very important how we get there. Any savings that we achieve earlier on are savings that will deliver further savings year on year. So there are many different ways of moving from today to 2050 or to 2030. The how, it's critical, and addressing refurbishments, it's a critical part of that.
That's again some good points. But Paul, Cundles, I mean, you actually you advise on organisations' estates. You talk about them. You'll probably have quite a good handle on the current stock and the refurbishment process that is probably needed. So what's your views on that?
So with the current stock and what is needed, we've been doing various assessments. So it's nice to get into the building physics side of things, because what the building physics side of things does is it does give you ammunition to give to the client, right, if you do this change, this is the carbon impact. If you do this change, you can get that costed as well. You can look at the costs longer term by using whole life carbon assessments in conjunction with operational energy. So we've been fortunate to be commissioned on a couple of projects recently, and they are both office buildings in the city centre of Birmingham, both circa 20 years, if not more, old. And it is looking at those buildings to make sure that you do spend the money as wisely as possible, because there is always a commercial element to this. What we'd love to say to city centre offices is open up the windows and use the benefits of natural ventilation for as long as possible. But the issues are, there's some real issues, which is around pollution and noise, and the ability to do that is sometimes constrained. But in the future world, if we're looking at 2050, there will be less cars or less polluting cars in the streets of Birmingham. So there is more opportunity to open up those windows. So as I kind of mentioned earlier, if you're taking one first step, and we all talk about passive design, if you look at the fabric first approach, when you come to replace that facade, do one thing, please, Mr. Client, let the windows be openable, even if you can't open them now, because by doing so, you give the ability of the tenants, the future owners of that building, to reduce their carbon footprint and have the benefits of the well-being of the fresh air, especially in the pandemic. Now knowing that the benefits of natural ventilation, but that is just one small step, and there's many more I could explain.
Yeah, I mean, I like the point you made there, Paul, about by 2050 there'll be less cars, and certainly less polluting cars, noise and emissions. Interesting enough, I think that's probably happened now in Birmingham. It's probably what we have seen in the current pandemic is a lot of the ideas we think we were working towards have been accelerated, and I think we're probably going to see that. And there's a big debate, isn't there, at the moment about whether or not we're going to come back to the big city metropolises completely or in part. And I think that'll be an interesting debate over the next few years. So there's some good points there. Jane, you're obviously at Morgan Sindall, so you're involved in actually doing the refurbishment works. You build new projects, but you also do a lot of refurbishments. How does Morgan Sindall see this?
Yeah, I think as we talked about before, 80% of the buildings by 2050 are going to already be there, and we've got this legacy now. So when we are doing refurbishment works, these buildings haven't been done with sort of designing for sort of refurbishment or demolition in mind. So there is that legacy of perhaps composite materials that can't be recycled. That's going to push up not just the fact that the waste might have to go to landfill, but also the associated carbon emissions associated with that. But yeah, so I think there's opportunity there. For me, it's about the process and having that time to assess what's there, what's available, what different options are in terms of low embodied carbon materials or low recycled content materials. It's making that key part of the decision making. Obviously there's so much to balance in terms of availability and supply chain, but it's doable. I think one of the key ways to do that is having the firstly the ambition, but secondly the time to do the analysis on any refurbishment or new build project for that matter.
There's 2 points came from that, John, for me. It's a whole industry problem, and therefore it's a whole industry solution. So it's not just a project manager or a professional services provider or the estates advisors or the construction. It's those people who work below all of us in that whole sort of supply chain. And I thought that was that's extremely an extremely important point. Let's just build on that then. Let's talk a little bit about the buildings. The new buildings that we're going to build, because we are going to build new buildings. So that's what we're in. That's what our sector's about, and that's what we do. They reckon over the next 40 years, we're going to build 230 billion square meters of new buildings, which I'm told is like adding Paris or a site the size of Paris on the planet every single week. Which, when you start to look at it in those terms, it becomes sort of eye-watering in terms of what we are doing. Now, I'd like to think we're probably going to create some new green spaces at the same time, because construction will be about landscaping as well, but we are certainly going to build some new buildings. And by 2030, you've mentioned it, all of you, we need to build on a zero carbon basis. So procurement, design, construction, they all have roles. So if we take them one at a time, let's try and think a little bit about that then. So Jose, talk to me about procurement and design. How is that going to help achieve what we do?
I think what's going to be critical is that those targets are set from the very beginning of the projects. They need to be in the design brief. The client needs to put them there, ideally in the first place. And if they are not there, we as consultants need to do our part and challenge clients where we think they are not taking it as far as it's needed. As you've mentioned before, it's an issue that affects the whole construction industry, and that's reflected in the Construction Declares Climate and Biodiversity Emergency Declaration. It's been signed by all the different disciplines, design disciplines. We are fully multidisciplinary and therefore have been able to join all those. And now we also have the contractors also having joined the declaration. So it's important that it's there, it's in the client brief. It's important that sustainability, that those targets, that zero carbon, are no longer seen as something that can be taken out, that can be removed. It's an integral part, is a requirement as important, in our view, probably we would say more important than other requirements in projects. And it means very detailed analysis, given our background on building physics, on the operational energy on buildings, on doing that in a more methodical and representative way, so we can reduce and remove that energy performance gap that there is. That we also mentioned the embodied carbon. We need to have a life cycle analysis as another part of the works that we need to be doing in every single project, and also from the beginning, not leaving it till we get on site. And there needs to be a redefinition of cost. Capital cost will always be an issue, but we need to take a whole life perspective to this and include all those different elements. And we have the guidance. We have, it's been mentioned, the LETI work. We have the UK Green Building Council Net Zero Carbon Framework. We have the Better Buildings partnership with the Design for Performance as well. We have climate commitments being undertaken by many organizations, and that includes companies with very large real estate portfolios. So we have everything in there. We just need to make sure that at no point there is a lack of focus, a lack of eyesight, and that we constantly track the performance of what we are designing, what we are building, and then that we monitor the performance of those buildings in a proper way, and we feedback and achieve the targets that we are meant to be achieving.
So setting targets, get that. then measuring, because if you measure it, you can take some action, but you must take the action if you measure it, because there's no point in measuring it. So, you know, some points there. Paul, Jose mentioned some very large property portfolios. You obviously work with clients with some very large property portfolios. Are you finding they're sort of involved at the very early stages now? Are they setting targets? Are they putting realistic KPIs in? Are they then measuring them? And have they got plans in place to do that?
They have all of that. I just want to pick up on Jose's points. He mentioned 3 brilliant guidelines that have come out and 3 documents or 3 things that have come out in the last 12 months. LETI has a really good guide for zero carbon, and it is a guide, and you know there's still work being done on that. The UK Green Building Council definition, the framework definition, gives you kind of the roadmap in order to achieve zero carbon, and more recently has given you some energy kind of use measures to make sure that you reduce your energy first. And there's the design for performance. So just picking up on your question or comment, and the design for performance. Design for performance is based on a methodology that came out in Australia called NABERS. And NABERS got badges for their buildings in the commercial world. You can get 5 stars or 6 stars for your buildings when they actually perform and they achieve those energy targets. And they saw something like 75% reduction in their energy usage in commercial landlord properties over the last decade. And it's phenomenal what they've achieved because they actually had to demonstrate it. This is such an exciting time in our industry. This is such, you know, being a building physicist or being a sustainability person, we know we have the tools we've designed for performance. We have been employed, we're doing 3 models that I'm aware of in my team for design for performance, where we concluded that one of the offices in Birmingham is using a lot of energy, it's being managed really well, and this is the route map to reduce it. We're looking at an existing retailer we've measured their existing stores and we know what energy consumption they've got, and we're using that digital twin, that design for performance methodology to actually say, if you do this, that, and the other, you will reduce your carbon footprint by X, and it's quite accurately predicting it in the future. They will then make the decision during that design process to implement that in their new stores or not. And they want to be the first, they want to demonstrate that they can do it. And we are fortunate as an international company to have already done this and seen zero carbon establishments being done in operation, including the upfront embodied carbon. If you generate more energy than you use, you can then offset on site, which is not always possible, but is something there. So yes, clients are coming to us now saying, we want this, we mean it. What does it cost is always there, the capital cost. I saw today a spreadsheet from a cost consultant on a zero carbon extra living piece of work that we are designing this accommodation for 55-year-olds and onwards, which need the happy principles for well-being and daylight. And we looked at applying all of the kind of zero carbon design, and we've costed it as well. So now we're in a position where we can say that piece there on the fabric, or that piece there on the windows, or that piece there on the air source heat pump costs this as a primary cost, and it will pay back in this time based on, you know, the energy savings and the like. So no, it is good.
It is, yeah. You made one interesting point there, which I'll just pick up on, which was the that you produce the reports to the clients in this retail space, and they can make the decisions if they want to. I don't think it will be a case of whether they want to, because the people who will be going through their shops will actually be making them make those decisions, because that's the way the young people will be forcing the hand on property constructors going forward. So I think there's that positive sort of pressure. Just on the final question I had on that was procurement design, and I said construction. So Jane, Morgan Sindall, you're building buildings, you're building schools, you're building hospitals. Again, the measurement piece, are you implementing that, and are you taking some of the comments that Jose and Paul have mentioned, and are you KPIing the construction and seeing the benefits and the outcomes from that?
Yes, absolutely. We're working through looking at our own carbon calculators, you know, not for those people that are experts in carbon and able to do that, in design teams, but for our site teams to, make sure that we understand the differences between different procurement of different sources of materials from different manufacturers. So we've got calculators that enable us to do that in an easy way, building on information based on that outputs from things like the BIM model and builds of quantities, so we can sort of further refine. So if we do any value engineering exercises, so whether that's to make the steel frame leaner or reduce the depth of the floor slab, we can see the difference that makes to carbon, and then we've got that in our suite of information to give to the client as part of the look. If you do X, yes, it might cost so much more, but this is the carbon savings in terms of tons of CO2. Like I say, we know that embodied carbon is becoming more critical as operational carbon efficiencies are being gained. So that's where we're sort of focusing effort at the moment. Plus also working with our supply chain to understand what their capabilities are, where they've got innovative low carbon materials. We understand availability constraints, and we're able to contact them when the need arises, and hopefully if a client specifies low carbon and it's a key priority for the build, we've got the opportunity then to sort of do that exercise and prove the carbon savings, because upfront carbon is key for me. You can't go back like you can with operational carbon and do retrofit on buildings. You've spent that carbon on day one when that practical completion, you hand that building to a client, much of that carbon spent, and there's then nothing you can do. It is what it is. So I think for me, upfront carbon is an area that, and we are certainly focusing on that because of that fact.
I like the innovation piece, Jane. I really did. I like that because very often that ecosystem of larger contractors with their experience, larger professional services and stakeholders, but with that smaller groups, people who sort of are challenging the sort of status quo and bringing that innovation and having that in your supply chain, I think is absolutely fantastic. So there were some great points there. Look, this has been a great discussion today. I think the key points, which I think I can see that we can take away here, are a whole life approach. It needs to start at the beginning. That's 0 and 1 stages in REBA. We must build our view of carbon and how to reduce it and deal with it very, very early in the project. We must measure and then take actions. Clearly, if we measure and don't take actions, don't bother. Why are you doing it? And I think that'll be driven by the younger people and the way they want to work coming forward. We may have left it late, but I don't think we should get hung up on that. We are where we are. We're now focused on it. Okay, we've got other issues to deal with, and we know that. But let's be positive, because I think together we can actually get behind it. Jose made a great point. We can be green without sacrificing growth, and I think the government's acknowledged that, particularly around the green jobs and the green jobs initiative. And I think if we can get into procuring for value, which is the whole life cost versus the actual upfront cost, and bringing carbon in and into that sort of calculation from the social value piece, then we've probably got something. So finally, I've got one question for you all. In one sentence, if you could give one message, to the government, what would it be? So I'll start with Jose.
Thank you, Gerard. I was hoping that this time I wouldn't be going first to have a few more seconds to think. In terms of the message, I think it's one I said before. We need to put the resources, and that includes the funding that we need to get this done. We don't have time to waste. We need to get going with it, and we are at a time where it aligns with the need for a very significant economic recovery, and we need that to be green. So let's make sure that the government enables us as an industry and us as a society to be able to deliver that.
Okay, so the message there is let us do it because we know what we're doing. Let us get on with it and help us do it. Okay, Paul, what's your one sentence?
I had a bit of the luxury of having a few minutes there to think about this one. And I was thinking, well, what does government do? They can lead by example by doing good stuff on their own stock, or they can introduce policy Funding's good, but funding shouldn't be a barrier because it should make economic sense. So let's get the policy in building regulations that's mandatory, that we have truer, greener, low energy, well built, good quality buildings.
Okay, policy then. So that's regulation. Make sure, set as the framework, government, and then let us get on with it. So Jane, your sentence is going to be really snappy and really on the message because you've had the most time.
Collaboration. One word even. Yeah, I just think industry working together, design houses with principal contractors and clients is key to delivery of these net zero carbon targets. I do think that you know, we've seen through the pandemic how fragile the world is, and you know, there's a fear that climate change would be fall off the radar because of it. But if anything, the signals are that it's even more important because we've realised how fragile we are as a species. So over now.
So,
thank you.
No, collaboration. I think that, I mean, you know, between the three of you, you've actually ticked all the boxes, I think, there. And I think one of the things we have learned in this pandemic is that when we work together, we work better. And I think the construction sector is certainly a leading light in the way it's tackled a lot of the issues around the pandemic. We'll see how it tackles the employments within our own sector, because that's going to be a fairly big challenge. But look, I want to say thank you to all of my guests today. Jose from PIC, Everard, Paul from Cundalls, and Jane from Morgan Sindall. And just say to everybody who's listening, please tune in again soon for the next instalment of the Building Blocks podcast series brought to you by Pagabo. My name is Gerard Topos. I'm Executive Chairman. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you soon.